Did you know that before the Lord of the Rings, Sauron turned himself into both a werewolf and a vampire? Alla Tulia Meldonia Aharamari essay. My name is Rainbow Dave and welcome to another Tolkien lore video. So I guess when we imagine Middle-earth, we tend to think of elves and hobbits and ents and dwarves and orcs and wizards and all that kind of thing, right? But in this video, I'm going to talk about the existence of two lesser-known races, werewolves and vampires. Now, I feel like in the 21st century, whenever we read about vampires or werewolves, we imagine either very attractive bloodsuckers with absolutely no tan, or people who get bitten and grow a ton of body hair every time there's a full moon. But this is not how Tolkien envisioned these creatures. So the first mention of werewolves chronologically in the Legendarium is found in the Grey Annals, and Tolkien tells us that creatures that walked in wolf shapes first appeared in Middle-earth in the year 1330 of the Age of Starlight. So this is a long time before the moon is even a thing. And unsurprisingly, these werewolves served Melkor, and they came to dwell in his evil citadels of Utumno and Angband. But whereas contemporary werewolves tend to be humans who transform into humanoid wolves, this just simply isn't the case in Tolkien's world. So that word werewolf, it comes from the Old English werewolf, which literally just means man-wolf. And because Tolkien had such a masterful knowledge of Old English, his werewolves are just that. Wolves with a conscious mind like a man's. And this gives us a clue as to how they came to exist in Middle-earth. So, as I'm sure we know, Tolkien makes a significant distinction between wolves and wargs, and neither of these are the same as werewolves. It seems that wolves are simply wild animals, aligned to no one in particular. But wargs were bred by Melkor and later by Sauron to be wholly evil creatures. So where do werewolves fit in? Well, it seems probable that the werewolves were the ancestors of these evil wargs. They were the Dark Lord's first attempt at breeding demonic wolves. And by all accounts, these werewolves appear to be a bit of a step up from their later kin. Because although werewolves look like wolves, and they exist in the bodies of wolves, we are told that they are in fact a lot more than that. They are evil spirits, perhaps even dark Maiar, that have either willfully inhabited, or possibly been imprisoned inside, wolf bodies. And this makes them incredibly intelligent. Much more so than wargs, because unlike wargs, and in some cases some orcs, werewolves have a theia. They have a soul. Now, although werewolves were first bred by Melkor, and they do serve Melkor, they are in fact much more closely associated with Melkor's chief disciple, Sauron. You see, the first werewolf ever to be bred was a being named Draugluin, and he was a dreadful terror upon Middle-earth. He was the father of all subsequent werewolves, and most likely the sire of all future wargs. Now Draugluin dwelt upon Sauron's Isle of Werewolves, which is called in Sindarin Tol in Gauhoth. And Draugluin had the power of speech, and he was a loyal servant to the forces of darkness. But he is not the mightiest of the werewolves. You see, Sauron believed himself to be the greatest of all werewolves, and he even transformed into a giant one to prove his point. But he was wrong. Although Sauron was indeed a mighty shapeshifter back in the day, he was no match for the real greatest werewolf, a being called Karkaroth. So, Karkaroth is an utterly terrifying character, and he totally devastated a huge area of land when he was allowed to run free. Now, I don't want to go too much into his story because it's a bit of a spoiler for Beren and Luthien, but at this time he was known by the elves as Anfauglir, which means the jaws of thirst. And Tolkien tells us that no wolf ever matched Karkaroth in terms of power, not ever again in Middle-earth's history. So it might seem like werewolves are relics of a bygone age, and by the time of the Lord of the Rings, they're nothing but a dreadful memory. However, this is not the case, because in the Lord of the Rings, during their time in Rivendell, Gandalf tells Frodo that in Sauron's army, there are orcs and trolls, there are wargs and werewolves, which means even at the end of the Third Age, some werewolves are still alive and well. Now, although werewolves never appear on the page after the First Age, don't forget that in the Battle of the Five Armies, the Fifth Army is an army of wolves. And it's quite difficult to speculate whether or not there were any werewolves in this army because Tolkien's writing style and tone is so different in The Hobbit from the rest of the Legendarium, but I find it hard to believe that a group of wargs could muster themselves into an army without at least some sort of higher influence leading them to do so. But I couldn't possibly finish up this video without also talking about an even more mysterious creature of darkness. And that is, of course, the vampire. So, in Tolkien's Legendarium, there is only one vampire that is ever named in the entire story. And she is called Thuringwethiel, which means the woman of secret shadow. And Thuringwethiel is described as being a herald of Sauron's. So it seems that both vampires and werewolves are much more closely associated with Sauron than with his master. Now, just like werewolves, vampires are very different in Tolkien's world than in most contemporary fiction, because they don't really seem to be humanoid. Thuringwethiel is described as bat-fell, and she was wont to fly in vampire's form, and her great-fingered wings were barbed at each joint's end with an iron claw. So it seems that the vampires of the Legendarium are some sort of demonic bat creature, although just like werewolves they are far more intelligent than simple animals. And as a messenger, we must presume that Thuringwethiel at least had the powers of speech. And although Thuringwethiel is the only named vampire in the story, Sauron himself shapeshifts into a vampire in order to escape a fight. In fact, he does this only moments after turning into a werewolf. Now, vampires are not ever mentioned again after the First Age, but if we look once again at the Battle of the Five Armies, we'll see a reference to a great horde of bats that block out the sun and ally themselves with the goblins. So is it possible that just as the wargs are descendants of the ancient Draugluin, could these bats be descendants of Thuringwethiel? I guess all we can do is speculate. Anyway, I hope you guys found this little lore video interesting. If you did, there are plenty more like it on the channel. But as always, until next time, my dear friends, much love, stay groovy, and Navaya Melanine.